Hi, everyone. This is Lead with Who You Are. I'm Dia Bondi, and on this show, we explore and discover what it truly means to lead with who you are, and we're doing it with people who embody just that. In this episode, we're talking with Dr Haan about intentional vulnerability as a path to awaken senses in order to crush ego and lead with what's essential. Nick is an amazing example of someone who leads with their truest self and does it courageously. This is a great one. And if you like this conversation as much as I did, you can like and subscribe to the show wherever you listen, so it's right there on your feed. We'll be having more conversations like this one to help you connect your leadership and yourself. Our guest today is Dr. Dr Haan, who is a moonshot agitator for solving the world's biggest challenges and creating a future that's good for people and the planet. He draws from his multifaceted background, which you'll hear about, to enable leaders to cultivate new mindsets, insights, and skills necessary to thrive in a digital transformation era. Nicholas is a Swahili-speaking U.S. East Africa hybrid, originally from California and now living in Zanzibar and throughout Africa for almost the last 30 years. His expertise cross-cuts technology, innovation, impact, food security, disaster aid, climate change, energy, education, genetics, and information systems. He's everywhere. He is a sought-after speaker and an innovation advisor to corporations, governments, and startups around the world. Dr. Haan has been with Singularity University since 2012 as Vice President for Impact, Faculty Chair of Global Grand Challenges, and Managing Director for the Global Startup Program, bringing gifted entrepreneurs from around the world together for a 10-week program to ideate and launch Moonshot Ventures. Nicholas is co-founder of Kizo Africa, an online education program and social club for African youth to thrive in the digital era. He currently serves as co-chair of the Advanced Technology and Artificial Intelligence Working Group of the United Nations for food security analysis, including the global standard used for classifying and analyzing food insecurity called the Integrated Food Security Phase Classification. So happy to have Nick with us today. Nick, hello.
Well, hello. Nice to see you again, even virtually.
I know. Thank you for doing this. I have so many dreams about coming to Zanzibar with a group of entrepreneurs that I'm working with and doing a retreat expedition with your, in your reality, but we'll put a pin in that and talk about it another time.
All right.
Today I want to just, I'm just really thankful that you said yes to this so quickly. And you're such an inspiring, I want to use the word character, and I know that's not right. But you have such a dynamic life. And so let me just set this up for our listeners today, and then we'll jump in.
Great.
I just will start by saying I've invited you on the show, Lead with Who You Are, to talk about how you lead an extraordinary life, one that I perceive as sort of borderless and boundaryless. You seem to live on the edge of everything, sort of exposing yourself to a really wide range of experiences and problems and solutions and different kinds of thinking, Nick. And when I think of you, I really think of where you've placed yourself in the world. So you and I met at Singularity University a handful of years ago, and the work we did, and in that work that we did together, you spoke a little bit about a few things I wanted to draw on in this podcast, Lead with Who You Are. One, your adventure and expedition, kayaking and life around that. Two, your thinking on exponential tech and both the great threat and great gift that it can be to the world. And then three, like how you've actually come to live the life that you do.
Sure. Sounds great.
Great. So we'll start, where we always start on this show, which is, who are you? How might you answer that question?
Who am I? I am extremely fortunate to be living at this time of human history when there's so much change happening right now and so much opportunity to create a better world. And I feel really privileged to be a part of this moment in time and to be activating myself towards those ends And as you mentioned, I'm a hybrid of all kinds of things. I'm a California, East Africa hybrid after, living out here in East Africa, where I'm calling from right now, from Zanzibar. I've been living in these parts of the world for over 30 years, and I'm Californian, 100%. And so I go back and forth, and then the whole world in between. So I'm a hybrid of that. I'm a hybrid of different academic professions. I'm in a hybrid of many different interests, professional interests, etc. So I'm really a hybrid person, the person in between spaces, if you will.
I love that. That's kind of why for me, it hits me as like, you're just sort of on the edge of everything. It's like you're everywhere and also so much who you are while you are sort of in between all those things. It's very compelling to me, and I'm so thrilled to have you to talk to us about your life and your experience and your point of view from where you stand today. So starting with your expedition self, can we start there?
Sure. It's the fun stuff.
Yeah, super fun. So tell us a little bit about your kayaking experience and experiences and what that really is for you. When I first met you and you talked about it, it wasn't just like, this is a hobby. It felt like more than that. So talk to me about that experience and the experiences and what that really is for you.
Yeah, and it is more than a hobby. It's a drawing, and it's an opportunity to experience life on the edges, and quite frankly, it's an opportunity for me to get to know who I am. To play off your show, you're talking about leading with who you are. We can't lead with who we are if we don't know who we are, who we are. And for me to sum it all up, that kayaking it's a journey, exploration of who I am. And the way that gets revealed through kayaking, and what we're talking about here, maybe just to back up, is expedition kayaking. So me and a buddy, one guy, a guy named Brett Wibberley, who is as crazy as I am on these things, we'll pick challenges, sea kayak challenges that have never been done before that we know of, and we'll set off and do them in the wilderness, so to speak. Not so to speak, in the wilderness. So
and we're not talking about a 3 or 4 hour trip.
No.
What are we really talking about? What do these things look like?
Well, so we're the first ever to kayak the length of Lake Victoria, which is a little over 200 miles long, and that took us a little over 2 weeks of kayaking 10 hours a day, every day practically for 2 weeks. We're the first ever to kayak the length of Lake Turkana in northern Kenya and into Ethiopia, which is slightly shorter, but it took us just as long because it's more arduous. And we're not the first ever, but a kayak expedition we did fairly recently was the entire length of Lake Malawi, which is almost 300 miles long. So, and we do these totally just self-contained. Kayak, food supplies, water supplies, health supplies, everything, fix, repair kit supplies, and off we go. And we have a map and we have a general sense of what we're going to do each day. And we might land in an island rock in the middle of a lake somewhere one time, or sleep on a totally deserted, remote beach in another place. And just the experiences you get to see when you're doing that are intense. And that's how I get to know who I am.
That's so beautiful. I love, and what is it that allows you to discover who you are, where you might be discovering a new place? Is it the physical challenge of it? Is it the spaciousness of it? Is it what in the process allows you to get into relationship with yourself?
Definitely the physical challenge of it. When you're paddling literally 10 hours a day for many days in a row, it's a physically taxing time. The various events that can happen at any one time. Like I know my friend Brent Wibberley, when we're doing Lake Turkana, he says, look, we can be attacked by crocodiles. We can be attacked by warring ethnic groups. We can be overturned in our kayak with inclement weather, the scorpions and snakes and other things. All of these things can really kill you. But he says, to reassure me, he says, but they're not all going to happen at one time. So we'll just deal with them one at a time. So the point is, and this is life really, life's got all kinds of crazy things around the corner. They don't come all at you typically at one time. And you learn to, focus on a challenge as it comes up, and you solve it. There's also, to take this to a more interpersonal level, particularly with kayaking. And if you're doing doubles, have you ever done doubles kayaking?
I have not. I have not.
Okay. Because I have a kayak business here in Zanzibar, and I can always tell you who's going to have the worst troubles in the water in a kayak, and that's married couples who are trying to tandem kayak, because it's this weird dynamic of power and dismissiveness and whatnot that goes on. Well, when you're doing expedition kayaking and you have that dynamic coming up, you learn very quickly how to completely disintegrate your ego. Because when your life is on the line, and it is on the line, about that person and sitting in front of you, and we're kayaking, and decisions are being made, literally, they're going to affect our lives, how the kayak is handled and whatnot. You can be darn sure there are times when I'm thinking, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to do it this way. But you have to very quickly realize your ego has nothing to do with this. It's about working together effectively. That's paramount. And making right decisions is also paramount, but not your ego. So it's a really big life learning experience to destroy your ego when you're out there, because otherwise you would die.
So that's a beautiful place to ask. When you think about, for me, so much of my work feels interdisciplinary. I draw on one thing and apply it to something else all the time. I'm looking, I think maybe I've shared on this podcast, I certainly share with my audiences that I learned to ride motorcycles in my 30s and learned about counter steering and use that sort of the idea of pushing away from the opposite direction of the turn you want to go into, just as a mental model for thinking about when something's not working. What if we go the other way? Like, I'm drawing on all my experiences all the time. So I'm curious, from the place that the story you just told about sort of what it means to be challenged in a way that forces you just to disintegrate your ego and make right decisions. And I imagine there's cooperation and courage and listening and choices and all the things that show up. How is that connected to your professional life and your life's work?
Well, it is very much connected because one thing we know is if you are to lead, and if you're leading with your ego, people will lose faith in you very quickly. People are good ego sniffers, so to speak. If you're leading out of true passion, and you're leading out of true sense of I've done the hard work to understand, I have the knowledge set, and so I actually have something to contribute here. That skill set translates into the leadership that I do in my work on global food security or climate finance or African education and whatnot that I'm all working on. I'm sure we'll get to that. So yeah, there is a direct relationship there, because what we see right now, you don't have to look far to be extremely disappointed in our quote unquote leaders. It's a farce. In fact, I think the word leader has been abused about people taking on that title without really thinking about what it means. And for me, doing that kayaking helps me refine my own sense of who I am and what it means to be a leader. And being a leader means you've got something to contribute. Your ego is not there as much as possible. Hey, I'm not immune to it, right? I have constant ego issues, as we all do. And there's another aspect to this as well, I would say, and that is throwing yourself at vulnerability. I'm channeling a bit of Brene Brown right now. But when I do these kayak trips, it's full awareness that I'm making myself vulnerable by choice. And yeah, I'm taking some calculated risks and whatnot, but it's that sense of hyper vulnerability and being in that state and realizing it's okay. It's okay to be, not only is it okay to be vulnerable, but when you're hyper vulnerable is when your senses come alive and when your focus gets there. So that's a big aspect of it too. Leave alone having crocodiles try to attack you.
And that's like a literal story. I remember when we first met, you told me the story of kayaking through some gator waters that were pretty serious and having to make a choice, I think. Do you remember the story you told me? Do you know which one I'm referring to?
Oh yeah, I'll never forget. So this is on Lake Turkana with my colleague, my friend and expedition buddy Brent. So it's just the two of us on this kayak, and we're on Lake Turkana, this desert lake in northern Kenya and Ethiopia, extremely remote. We got 18 flat tires driving up and driving down to the lake. That gives you an idea of how remote this lake is. Well, about halfway through, prior to that, we knew the lake is chock filled with crocodiles, big Nile crocodiles. So me being the Singularity University kind of technology guy, I said there must be a solution, technology solution. Maybe we can drag a sonar type device in our kayak underneath the water to scare off the crocodiles. So I said, oh, let me contact the world's leading expert on the zoologist on crocodiles. And sure enough, some guy in Australia, I look him up, I email him, I say, hey, we're going to do this expedition. Here's an idea I have around keeping the crocodiles away. Would this work? He writes back one very turt email line. I want nothing to do with this. You are foolish. Don't do it. So we did it.
And of course, that probably got you like, that made you want to do it even more. No, I don't know if that's true.
So we ended up, we did do it. And yeah, I think we learn in this day and age also about leading with who you are and discovering who you are is we can't listen to experts anymore. Experts have received wisdom about the way the world has been created and the way the future is. And we have to actually respect it, listen to it, but not lean on it anymore and make our own decisions that we feel are best for us.
Yeah, that's a transfer of power, isn't it?
Yeah. And yeah, we did have crocodiles try to attack us one point. And I thought my bear mace that I bought from REI was going to help us and everything. And that's just a false hope. But we did okay.
Well, you're still here. You're still with us, which is amazing. You survived the gator waters, the crocodile waters.
All 8 fingers. Just kidding.
I kind of held my breath for a second right then when you said that.
Well, it's no joke, actually. We know kayak expedition people who have some real problems, and I should not speak lightly of that because people have had terrible tragedies.
So I love this notion of sort of leaning on who we are, taking in the information of experts, but not handing over decision making so much to them, and sort of having a balance of, I'm going to say, a balance of power there. I just want to shift a little bit to the work that you do in your work life or that component of your life and sort of your notions around exponential technology. So you've done a lot of work in the world of food insecurity. Can you talk about that a little bit and what the IPC or the integrated food security phase classification is? You've had a really, really global eye for a long time. So maybe share with us a little bit about what that work is in food insecurity and what the IPC is.
Sure. So yeah, I'm of this rather esoteric ilk of being a global food security analyst. You won't hear that title around very much. But it's, of course, with the Ukraine crisis going on, people are realizing how fragile and COVID, leave alone Ukraine, COVID, then Ukraine, now climate. People are realizing how fragile our global food system is. Well, it's been fragile for hundreds of millions of people in the world who are not nearly as privileged as we are on this call. Mm-hmm. And those are the people I deal with, I work with. So I'm a global food security analyst, analyzing the worst of the disasters in the world that happen, whether they're tsunami or civil war or drought or floods or market disruptions or you name it, things that make people hungry. And I analyze those. I try to predict those, and I create the systems for people around the world to use. And the right place, right time. I happened to be running a project in 2002 where I kind of had an aha moment that there's got to be a better way for analysts, food security analysts, to do their job. And thus was the creation of this standard classification for food security analysis, for classifying the severity and magnitude of food insecurity, kind of like a Richter scale for food insecurity, that it would be comparable over space and time. So
you can decide to deploy resources or not, or when to? Is that the idea?
Exactly. So we can have human rights-based, rational decision-making on how to deploy billions of dollars of humanitarian assistance and other types of assistance to the people who need it most, not the people who might be politically expedient or might be, for any other reason, more attractive to help. So basically, this system is to shine a light on the most vulnerable, most hungry people in the world in a scientific manner. I'm very happy to say that it's now being used in well over 30 countries and on track to go up to 80 countries in the world. And I still work on that system, and I'm a co-chair of what's called the Advanced Technology and AI Working Group for the UN that develops this system.
It's no surprise to me that you talked earlier about sort of placing yourself in these life and death scenarios, because what you're pointing to are people and families who are facing life and death situations here.
Absolutely.
And to let how you evaluate that and the decisions that you make around aiding other people in evaluating that is absolutely has to be egoless.
It's humbling. It's egoless. It's a call to purpose. It's a hyper awareness of the value of life and the need to give everyone on this planet basic opportunities. And that's what draws me towards doing that work.
On the other side of the spectrum, you are part of the Singularity University's Grand Challenges program, and you know, that to me, there's like food insecurity, which is just foundational, fundamental survival for people and families. And then there's, the way in which that you engage with Singularity University, which is all very high level, tech aspirational type of work. I recognize that it touches some very fundamental and foundational things, but it feels like the other end of the spectrum. So can you talk a little bit about what the Grand Challenges program is and your role in it?
Sure. So I was previously the managing director of Singularity University's flagship program, the Global Solutions Program, and then faculty chair for Global Grand Challenges and also vice president of Impact at Singularity University. I still retain the faculty role. And really what that is the Singularity University thesis, and this comes from Ray Kurzweil and Peter Diamandis and all of our faculty. But the core thesis is that a suite of exponential technologies, digital technologies that are growing at exponential rates, like AI and robotics, digital manufacturing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, that the rate at which they're going is exponential, and it will not only disrupt many aspects of society, but it unleashes scarce resources to make them abundant, and therefore gives us whole new opportunities to solve the world's biggest challenges, to rethink food, to rethink learning, to rethink healthcare, etc. Now with this exponential technology mindset, how can we solve these problems? So that's basically the thesis of the Global Grand Challenge curriculum. So we work with corporations, investors, entrepreneurs, government officials to help them solve big challenges that they want to solve by merging exponential technology, innovation, and this mindset that our big challenges can be solved with new thinking now.
So I know I kind of just asked you a few questions that feel resume-ish, but it was really to build context to get to this question around this notion of the paradox of abundance, which is an idea that you shared with me when we first met. And I just, it's so compelling to me, the notion of the paradox of abundance, which I'm going to have you talk about in a second, but also I remember you talking about this idea that that while we have these exponential technologies in our hands for both good and bad, the way in which they get used for bad is triggered by isolating folks, by actually exclusion of folks, that the radicalization of people is a huge risk to the globe, and that inclusion, connectedness, these are my words, not yours, but keeping people part of things, part of the world, is a way in which we can combat the risks that come with exponential technologies that live on the planet right now. Am I even getting it half right?
Sure you are. Yeah, and those all resonate with me. And this is a paradox, the paradox of abundance, because Singularity University, this comes from Peter Diamandis, who wrote a book called Abundance. And one of the startups that I'm very much involved in is called Kizo Africa. Kizo means abundance. So I'm very much evoking that notion of abundance. And yet I'm acutely aware that it is a paradox, because I do have this other hat of seeing the worst traumas of the world people starving to death. And you're not going to tell them, hey, there's this abundant world over here. If you just change your mindset, everything will be great. No, absolutely not. It's degrading, and we need to take a big pill of humility before we go around that way. So in my own mind, abundance is a paradox. On one hand, it's a fantastic concept, and it is a technical reality. We live on a planet that is abundant. Energy is not scarce. Water is not scarce. Food is not scarce. None of this is scarce if we made certain choices about how to allocate resources. So they're technically not scarce.
But you're talking about I'm going to interrupt here and say that you're talking about systems choices, not necessarily individual choices.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
In the last 10 years, sort of the world of personal professional development, the world of coaching has really shifted a lot of, I'm going here now, Nick, but has shifted a lot of the, as you said, the responsibility to individuals. If you just had a different mindset, then everything would be unlocked. But it ignores, it's dangerous, I think, actually, because it ignores what you're pointing to, which is the other half of how systemically things. Yeah, we can't solve starvation with a mindset.
I totally agree with you. We have to look at the systems that are creating this. I was just listening to a podcast that had the famous astrophysicist Martin Rees on it, and he made a really poignant comment about ethics. And he said the difference between a few decades ago, say 1950s, and now is in the 1950s, you actually couldn't fathom solving for hunger. You just couldn't do it. You couldn't fathom solving for global learning or all these other global grand challenges. Now we can. And the fact that we don't and we haven't reveals our ethical misgivings and our emptiness. It's a matter of systemic ethical decisions that we're making, and economic systems, pressure on our politicians and whatnot, that we actually can solve these. We don't have to wait for some futuristic technology to solve any of those right now. We could solve them now. And both can be held true. Exponential technologies will increasingly unleash those and make it easier for us to close we'll call it the ethics gap. Because our systems right now there's a huge gap revealed in our ethical strength as a society when we can actually sit by and watch people starve to death. And there's no reason why they should.
So how do we break this paradox of abundance? How do we break it? Is it constant? Will it always be here? Or is it a thing to be broken?
The gap needs to be closed. And to me, shining a light, and this is on it, and making, we live in this interconnected world right now, and this gets back to the inclusion bit as well. A comment that I like to point out in the food security world, it's a little bit over dramatic, but starving people don't speak. They don't get heard. The last breath of a dying person from hunger isn't heard. And that's an extreme concept, but it applies to everyone. The person who didn't get good health care, the person who doesn't have good learning. You're telling me that 10-year-old girl who's not getting a good education is a global voice? No. But we all collectively have an obligation to be aware that the well-being of anyone, anywhere on this planet affects the well-being of all of us everywhere on this planet.
Nick, how you put yourself in the way of some big problems.
Yeah.
And when we started this conversation, you said, these aren't exactly the words you used, but you were basically I actively put myself in vulnerable. I bring forward my vulnerability on purpose.
Yeah.
Do you find, it sounds like the work that you do, the ideas, the problems you put yourself in the way of are, there's vulnerability everywhere. That feels vulnerable. How do you maintain, assuming you have some optimism, how do you maintain optimism?
That's a really good question. And I have to say the last few months I've been, I'll say struggling with that and reigniting that, finding that back within me, because we just keep getting hit over and over again. I won't do the litany. I think all of your listeners are well aware of many challenges that the world is facing now and in our immediate future. I guess I maintain my optimism by focusing on what what I can do to contribute towards solving big challenges. And yes, there's three big challenge areas that I'm dealing with: global food security, global climate change, and African youth unemployment. So, three big things that I'm doing with my professional career in startups. And each one of those, I feel like the way I'm working on them can actually move the needle on every single one of those. I'm not just making a contribution. So, basically, when I get involved, I try to think, what's the biggest potential positive contribution that I could make to move the needle on these? And that's what gives me optimism, because I focus on what I can do, my agency involved here. Recognizing, yeah, there are some things that could happen, some megatrends and cycles, and you could talk about all kinds of interesting theories on where we are right now. That removes our agency. Identifying what it is we can do, whether it's small or big, it gets us, at least for me, that's a strategy to keep my optimism up.
Before we started this conversation, before you dialed into the call, I was sharing with my production team that I'm feeling, I don't know that the word is defeated right now, but I go through cycles of feeling a little, sad about the level of impact that I can have, and feeling like it's really never enough, that it's not. And then when I really look at it, I realize that it can be enough, because it is actually making an impact. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like this dance between...
And it is what you can do.
Exactly. It's this dance between there's so much to do, feeling powerless, to then looking at the thing you actually have power with, and it can re-enliven, the effort, the optimism, the impact. And there's some reconnecting with the impact we can have that can, I think you use the word agency, that can remind us of our agency, that can activate our agency.
Absolutely.
And that's where sort of that sadness can transform into like, okay, what can I do right now?
Yes. And knowing that there's gazillions of other people who are doing what they can do, and that you don't have to carry the ball. There's just no way you can carry the ball, even though it might feel like, oh, the sky is falling, I have to lift the whole sky up myself. No, now's the time to double down on your agency, our agency as individuals, what we can do, knowing that others are doing what they can do as well. And to surround yourself with a community of people who are also like-minded, because the default, unfortunately, is societal consciousness is to go towards the doom and gloom side of thing. And that's not to put our heads in the sand, but you can't let that be your guide either.
So I'm sort of in the business of helping leaders use their voice as a tool in their own leadership and in their impact. I'm curious what your thought is around a leader's responsibility in how they use their voice today in an exponential world.
As I said a little bit earlier, I feel it's never been more a call for responsibility of leaders to use their voice, to think about really what leadership means, telling the truth, speaking truths, developing a society of inclusion by design, not by accident. It can't be an accidental effect of what you do. Inclusion has to be something we work towards. Having good and high levels of integrity. I could go through a list of what it means to be a leader, but I think now, especially, all of those, whatever litany you might come up with, are incredibly important, because there is so much change happening, whether we like it or not. This may sound like an area where we don't have a whole lot of agency, let's be honest, is exponential technologies are radically disrupting almost all aspects of humanity. There's not a whole lot. You can't put the brakes on that. And I say that with all due respect of certain pockets of communities of people in the world who are consciously taking a different viewpoint on that. I have deep respect for them. But I don't think humanity as a whole can put the brakes on these exponential technology. Therefore, with all these disruptions happening, it means we are faced with unfathomable challenges that we've never faced before. And they are coming at us all at once, unlike what my friend Brent said during our kayak trip. They're coming at us all at once. Inequality, climate change, disinformation, go down the list. It's like, wham, we're being hit. And incredible opportunity to redesign and rethink the way a world that we all could live in with our planet in peace. And that's never been more doable, but the only way we're going to get on that path is through true leadership. And we're not seeing it in our public figures much at all. It's really stunning, the dearth. You hear the Greta Thunbergs of the world and whatnot. It's like, wow, where do these people come from? Thank goodness. And why are they not being elevated to higher statures? Our politicians are a disappointment. Many of our corporate leaders, we see inkles around it, but then we see hedging and hawing. There's no room for hedge and haw right now. It's full bore. Let's take on our challenges with proper leadership and let's lead ourselves to a better world.
I think one of the things that I see the leaders that I work with and that leaders can do in general is to not think of their voice as the only voice, but to use their voice to what you pointed to platform others. Because you are in when you are in an ordained leadership position, I'm not talking about the everyone can be a leader kind of moment. I'm talking about ordained leadership, C-level leaders that have, with a stroke of a pen, an opportunity to really make a huge change in their organizations. These are people that can have a big cause and effect with what they say yes to and what they say no to. I think there is, huge opportunity to not have to do it, meaning speak it yourself all the time, but to platform others, because what you have so much authority. You have so much credibility, hopefully, that when you lend your authority and credibility to others, to platform them, to say what is important about the work that they do, to hold them up and let them speak and have them speak, invite them to speak, you are using your voice without speaking. Does that make sense?
Definitely.
I feel like I'll link it in the show notes, but Edelman runs the trust index every year. They do this research on sort of what the world trusts and doesn't trust. And I think this year's report showed that trust in government and faith institutions is like at an all-time low, and that where we really hold trust is with the organizations, with brands and with company leaders. And so to not underestimate how much weight our voice has is huge.
I couldn't agree more. I actually was just reading one such study. I'm not sure if it's the same one, but how disappointing that that's the institution that we can't have civic discourse institutions that we trust. So there's a lot to be said on that.
Nick, how is it that you've come to live the life that you do?
By not having a clear pathway, that's for sure, and kind of just going where opportunities emerge. Even like when I got into Singularity University, was just a complete random thing. I was in Rome working for the United Nations, and I applied to be a student on the in Singularity University. My cat is meowing. Can you hear that?
There always will be cats.
Okay, I could shush her up if it's going to be a problem. But so this is a good example of, I'll give you two transition points. One, UC Berkeley, when I was an undergrad back in 1988, I wasn't a great student, taking after hours classes so I could hope to pass the exams. And here comes in this teaching assistant woman who's about 28 years old. And we're in there late at night, and she says, I just got back from the Peace Corps. If any one of you want to hear about what the Peace Corps is, feel free to stay afterwards, and I'll tell you what that is. Okay, it's just a decision right on the spot. I was on a total track of doing, going right into med school and whatnot. Go up and speak with her, and immediately I get enchanted by this notion of, hey, I can go and do something else with my life for the next 2 years. So that made a big impression, that 15-minute encounter with that 28-year-old teaching assistant that was never by design. I never would have conceived of going into the Peace Corps. Boom. And that put me on a trajectory of well, where I am right now, being in Africa, getting into international relations, and my whole professional life is affected by that. So that's one such example. Another such example is 2011 in Rome, now working on this global multi-country project, and thought, I'm kind of at the top of my game here. I heard about this totally new, crazy institution called Singularity University that does a 10-week program. Let me apply to be a student, participant. I applied and I got rejected. I said, no, thank you very much. But then I heard from them 2 weeks later and said, would you come and be a teaching assistant during it? And I said, sure, but I'll just come for 3 months and the end of story. No, didn't turn into that. It was just right place, right time. And I think I already told you my long journey with Singularity University. So it's little forks in the road that pop up that if you're ready for, embrace them.
I hear that as your incredible ability to listen to what's around you, to listen to the invitations, and to listen to your own curiosity, and maybe not decide that it's off path and doesn't belong, but instead to say, that's actually interesting, and to let yourself follow it. Like, it is a little moment of an expedition right there to choose to like go down that path, even though you don't know exactly where it leads.
Definitely. And you've just made that link back to the expedition thinking as well. Recognizing that it is a new path. You don't know where it's going to go, but you're going to throw yourself wholeheartedly into it. And yeah, there is a bit of that mentality in my professional life. Well, not a bit, very much.
So what's next for you, Nick? Do you know?
Yes, no one really ever knows, but I have some ideas. So professionally, I'm still active in the global food security world. I'm part of an early stage startup called Kizo Africa that I made reference to before, which I am co-founding with a Kenyan woman named Regina Njima. And we've come up with this crazy idea to reach over 1 million African youth with these mindsets and skills and networks for them to thrive in the digital era. And we've been prototyping our product for over the last year, over the last 12 months. We just did an impact survey to find out really what impact did we have. And it's phenomenal. We're really excited and fired up about how we can positively improve people's lives. So now I'm focused on scaling that one up. And then the third one is another one of these, here I go. I'm opening up a whole new pathway. I'm getting into climate finance. So myself and a co-founder are cooking up a startup to create a global movement for people of the world to get actively involved in financing climate positive solutions. So we're working actively on that. So that's going to be another big part of my professional focus going forward.
I talked a little bit about optimism earlier. What are you optimistic about now?
Good question. What am I optimistic about right now? I'm optimistic that the best ideas have not yet been heard, and that we're unleashing innovative ideas, new passions amongst people around the whole planet. That's the thing I get most excited about, this democratization of technology. It's the activation of people around the planet. And so that's what makes me optimistic. And I know it comes with all kinds of tensions and things like that, for sure. But good things always come with some tension on the other end. So I'm optimistic about unleashing the innovative, principled voices around the world to help us solve the world's biggest challenges.
Nick, thank you so much for being with me today. You're so compelling, and all the stories you have and the impact you're looking to have is compelling. And I'm just glad to be in and around your edges.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I'm just, if anything, as I go on in my career, I actually get more humbled and just get more humbled about what I can contribute, and just think it as a gift for us to be able to make any contribution we possibly can.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you as well.
Lead with Who You Are is a production of Dia Bondi Communications, scored, mixed, and produced by Arthur Leon Adams III, and executive produced by Mandy Miranda. You can reach out to us at hello@diabondi.com or leave us a voicemail at 341-333-2997. You can like, rate, share, and subscribe at Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Go to diabondi.com for show notes and to learn about all it is that we do to help you speak powerfully and lead with who you are.